Noob error. Okay, let me start that all again. Can you hear me now? Wait for some. Wait for some positive. Yay! Okay, all right. So I have my microphone turned off, which is not Cyberpunk. Um, but now I have my microphone turned on, so let me start that again. So I have my synth leather, I have my corporate branding, and I have my soy calf. And I am ready to talk about some cyberpunk. What I don't have is mirror shades, and one of the things that I was saying just before when I was talking to myself was that I have a bright light shining in my eyes, so I could really use some mirror shades. So hi to everybody in the chat, and thank you for alerting me that I was inaudible, because that would have been pretty terrible. Especially when I listen to it later. I often record a little snippet and then check it again, but I forgot I didn't do this time. I was like, oh no, it's fine. Turns out it wasn't fine, so thanks. Okay, so as I was saying, what I want to do in these streams is talk about the way that various cyberpunk media relate to the sprawl. And sometimes that will relate pretty well in a way that you can easily see, oh, this is something that I could easily do in the sprawl. The sprawl is clearly modeled on this. Sometimes it won't be, and it might be a little bit more obtuse, or there might be some elements that you're like, man, I really wish the sprawl could do that. And so one of the things that I want to talk about in these streams is how you can make the sprawl do that. Because one of the most important chapters, I think, in any Powered by the Apocalypse game, I mean, I guess I could say this about any chapter, but the one that I am thinking is one of the most important right now is the hacking chapter. How you can take the game that I made and make it your game, because there's a certain extent to which once it leaves my sort of hard drive and goes into your hard drives, then it's yours, in a sense. This is part of the sort of core cyberpunk aesthetic, I guess. The street makes its own uses for things, and so let's get started with. I was going to use PowerPoint for this, but I had to use Google Slides because I guess OBS doesn't actually work very well with PowerPoint. If anyone has a way of getting OBS to work with PowerPoint, let me know. But I think it'll work fine with Google Slides. You can see in my, yeah. Okay. Let me get it on the right window. Okay, Cyberpunk Tropes. A slight delay. I should stop looking at the stream off on the side, but I want to see the chat. Oh my god. Dilemma. Okay. So, the first thing, so the sort of framing for today, and hopefully this will open up a larger conversation with the people who are watching, either watching now live in the chat, or who will watch it later, and when I post the link on, all the usual places that I post things. So the video I want to talk about is a short film that came out in 2012 called True Skin, written and directed by Stefan Zlotescu. I think I'm pronouncing that name right, but if I'm not, you can let me know. So this was pretty widely seen, I think. It has something like 5 million views on YouTube or something like that. And I think it is being optioned currently for a TV show. So it's popular, it struck a chord. It's certainly something that if you were looking for inspiration for Cyberpunk and you were browsing around YouTube, you might come across. Right, so what I want to do is sort of watch through this movie. It's pretty short. And then think about the things that you might take away for a Cyberpunk game. So this movie is on YouTube. The link is there. I'll post a link in the feed so you can watch it again on your own sort of time. I'm going to show it here, which I think is okay. If it's not, then I guess I'll modify or take down the video. So let's check it out, and then we'll talk about it.
It's all about the parts, and everyone wants them. Whether it's from the latest in designer brands, or whatever you can afford. This is what's in, and this trend is here to stay. I mean, let's face it, no one wants to be like them. Entirely organic. No one wants to get sick and old and die. My only choice was to enhance, even if it meant stealing that prototype.
This chip is going to revolutionize the world in so many ways.
How was I supposed to know the damn thing was classified? Now the whole world was after me. The feds, G-Corp, even the Reapers could smell something special inside me. So now I'm in Bangkok. Figured it was my best option. Unfortunately, being here wasn't enough. I was still being followed. I needed to blend in, disappear. So I headed to the nearest street market I could find. You can get anything you want here. From the tuk-tuk driver selling yum-yum chemical massage, to the latest and greatest in virtual drug programs, robot helpers, holographic suit emitters. You name it, they had it. I needed a new look. It was the only thing I could think of to shake them off my tail. Replacing my eyes was the easy part. My skin, not so much. Once the painkillers kicked in, I arranged to meet an old acquaintance of mine. If anybody could get me the new body signature I was looking for, it was definitely X. He insisted on meeting me in a crap hotel in the heart of the red light district. Mr. Foreign Man was passing through, and their eyes burned holes in my pocket. The working enhanced knew how to sell. They could be anything you wanted. Girl, boy, lady boy. I figured I should get off the streets, so I brought Plexi to the hotel room as I waited for X. If my compadre doesn't hurry his ass up, they'll light me up and cut this chip right out of me. Great timing, X. Looks like you just sealed my fate. Was gonna be dead in a matter of seconds. This version of me is, anyway. After all, I am one of them now. The unreal. And being unreal, I guess, does have its perks.
From the day you enhanced, your memories have been storing themselves secretly inside you. Our services consist of backing up those memories for safekeeping. If something were to happen to your physical self, we would simply implant your memories into a new you. That is why it is crucial to sign up for our daily backup program, so you never lose a moment of your life. Strive to live forever, and join the millions of augmented people who have taken this step. You know what to do, Kay. Just click the button below, and all of your fears about death will never haunt you again.
It's him. Take him down.
Synthetic heart. With a lifetime guarantee. It beats on, but love is obsolete.
Okay, I'm just going to turn that down a little bit, but let the credits play. I'm a big fan of watching credits. Yes, a legacy of some time in Los Angeles. So I really like that little film. Like most short films, it kind of opens up, or short stories as well, it sort of opens up a lot of questions and doesn't really answer everything in its in the short runtime that it has, which is what, like 5 minutes of actual movie, and then like the rest is credits at the end. But it does a really good job of hitting you with a lot of really evocative kind of cyberpunk tropes. So it turned out to be a really good example to use for what I want to do here. So if we look at the Sprawl's agenda to see how a film like that maps on to the Sprawl, make the Sprawl dirty, high-tech, and excessive. I feel like that is... Oh, I gotta turn off this extra video. Okay. That film does a really good job of showing us a really dirty, high-tech, and maybe not excessive world. You don't get much of a look into the corporate side, but you certainly get that high-tech, low-life contrast that is very cyberpunk. Okay. Fill the characters' lives with action, intrigue, and complication. We have a situation where somebody has done a job and they have it's sort of come back to bite them. So this is exactly the kinds of things that this is the kind of thing that could take place in the Sprawl. Certainly the way that I see it. And he seems moderately entangled in the Sprawl. He has contacts in Bangkok. So in terms of the Sprawl's agenda, it sort of hits those notes, which it should, because I wrote these to replicate Cyberpunk, and it is a pretty good Cyberpunk short film. Right? So the what is it? Principle? Chrome everything, then make it dirty is one of the principles that I think about a lot about in the Sprawl. Although I always misremember it, because I always remember this bottom line, bathed in neon, because I really like that imagery, and if I was going to write this again, I might make the entire principle chrome everything, bathed in neon, then smear it with filth or something like that. But this idea that everything has technology, but everything is slightly dirty. It's technology used for all sorts of purposes in all sorts of ways that it wasn't originally intended, and by all levels of society, and modified by all those people as well. So one of the things that this really reminds me of is one of probably the most influential literary pieces as far as the Sprawl goes, and that is William Gibson's New Rose Hotel, first published in 1984. And then published as part of Burning Chrome in 1986. There's a couple of other stories in Burning Chrome that are also really on point for what I wanted the Sprawl to do. Because in a way, New Rose Hotel and I think Burning Chrome itself and Johnny Mnemonic sort of boil down the essence of the Sprawl trilogy in terms of professionals in an underworld situation taking on the corporations and losing. Or maybe getting away, but not really like saving the world as such. Because the Sprawl is fundamentally a pessimistic game about corporate control and its inescapability. But the things that are similar between New Rose Hotel, which I highly recommend everybody read, and I'm not sure if it's available online anywhere. It might be, but if not, pick up Burning Chrome. It's totally worthwhile as inspirational material for the Sprawl. That would be my number one recommendation as far as books go. But in both cases, someone has stolen a thing from a corp, and the question is kind of why did they do it? And in the case of this film, it explores some of the ideas that I am trying to get at in terms of cyberware as well. Like, why did you decide to get part of your body cut out? Why did you decide to or how did you afford it, right? And you see different examples of both of those answers in those in the film. Like he did it because everybody's doing it. He doesn't want to be part of, what are they called, the unreal. He wants to be a real person because that's what you have to do, right? And so that expression of it is kind of a setting thing that you would want to set out as a group probably, but you could see individuals having that motivation as well, like a personal motivation that if you don't have cyberware, you're no one. And there's no, I mean, we don't really get a glimpse at the wider world. We get this character's view of the world, and his view of the world is that that's the case. That might not be the case in the rest of the world, so that's something to maybe consider as well. So in both cases, the protagonists are now hunted by the corporation. In both cases, it sort of ends with death. The difference in True Skin is that we don't know what death is, and this is one of the questions that that True Skin is kind of getting at. But it really is about like what happens when you mess with a corporation and what choices do the players make to get out of that situation or accept that situation, take out whole new bargains, devil's bargains if you like, to avoid a worse fate. So some of the themes that True Skin addresses, and some of these I've already kind of talked about. This idea of high tech and low life, and I think this is one of the things this film does really well. As well, like the neon, actually, first of all, before we even get to high tech, low life. If you want neon sprayed all over everything, this film is all about it. And the neon almost takes the place of chrome in the cyberware in an interesting way. Thinking about the way you play with light. Obviously, you can do that in movies in a lot more sort of emotive way than you can in at a table, although I guess if you want to get super fancy and play around with neon lights, you could. Yeah, Five Monkeys, was the corp even specified in True Skin? It was. It's called G Corp. There are two corporations mentioned, actually. G Corp is the one that he stole the chip from. It comes up a couple of times in visuals, and he mentions it once. And then the corporation that he is sort of selling his, or buying the memory off, like the sort of ambiguous ending, is RMI, although it's RMIII, research memory innovation insurance or something, or I can't remember what the RMI stands for. You can go back and look at that, but it's less important than they are a memory sort of backup corporation. So the other thing that this does really well, and if you have picked up November Metric, which the cover art is the background for this slideshow, you'll see that I am really into the globalness of Cyberpunk. I mean, I think that probably comes across in the sprawl anyway, but that was really part of my point of what I wanted to do with November Metric, is to assemble as global a collection of voices and a collection of spaces as I could. Because that's one of the things that always strikes me about the Sprawl trilogy and the stories in Burning Chrome, and all of most Cyberpunk really, although not all, is that it really does have this global view that you, the troubleshooting Shadowrunner Cyberpunk operatives, might be called to go all over the place in the service of these multinational corporations. They are multinational, and they make you multinational in service of their dirty work. So this is somebody who is, we're not really sure where he's from, but he goes to Bangkok. He has an American accent. We might assume he's American, we might not. Whatever, he goes to Bangkok, which is sort of visualized as this global city, where the corporation can still reach him. But he imagines there's an element of safety there, which there isn't. So the theme that is, another theme that is really prominent in the film is the human body. Lots of camera shots of augmented bodies, non-augmented bodies, old bodies, young bodies, bodies that are in some way deformed or have had like amputations or malnutrition. there's all sorts of like focus on that. And one thing that I didn't put on the slide, but is also I notice every time I watch it, is there are animal bodies in it as well, and a particular focus on eyes and animal eyes, and that really makes me think of both the more obvious reference is the owl in Blade Runner, which is in itself a sort of encapsulation of the entire animal theme of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Yeah, welding, yes. Cybercats. Yeah, that's Cybercat. I mean, anytime there's a cat, I'm like, oh, cool, a cat. But that cat with its eyes, cyber eyes, are pretty cool. So in this world that TrueSkin paints for us, there's this definite sense that not just humans are getting their bodies modified, but animals are as well. And what is that about? That's one of the spaces where there's all these questions. And so you could watch that movie and think, man, I want to play in that world. But what does that mean? And it's kind of up to you at that point. We'll see if they end up making this into a TV series, what they do with that. So the question with this sort of obsession with the human body and also with the cyberware that comes up in this, I think, is what is human? And more broadly than that, no, that's not what I want. Like, what is human consciousness? Because we have this sort of end moment where he's going to push the button, and he's thinking about it, and he seems to take quite a long time thinking about it, and then the last symbol we see is like the skull and crossbones, like as he pushes it, and that's it. And so what are we supposed to take away from this? Is this whole like rebirth insurance scheme legit? What does it mean for this person? He talks about this version of himself. What is the difference between this version and the next version? All those questions that, if you're familiar with Cyberpunk, and especially things like the original Ghost in the Shell, they're core themes of Cyberpunk. They're themes that, by and large, the Sprawl doesn't explicitly address, right? Because the thing in the Sprawl that I'm most concerned about is the sort of ubiquitous corporate control, that political angle. But I am obviously also interested in this question of the body and where the line between human and artificial is, or maybe not so much that as what makes someone decide to become more artificial. And I explicitly leave that open in that I don't have a humanity stat or an essence stat that says, oh, the more metal you have in your body, the less human you are. Because I don't want to say that as the designer. I don't want that to be the part of the game. I want that to be a decision that you all make at your tables. I take a slightly more optimistic view, I guess, of technological augmentation. That it, like, this is a deep philosophical question, but I'm not leaning into the this makes you less human. Yeah, as I say, that's a question that you can go take whatever direction you want, and I don't want to privilege any one answer. So another interesting theme of this movie is that this guy has a ton of information at his disposal, but he has no power to do much about it, right? He knows exactly where his friend is. He has some sort of onboard computer that can tell him exactly where the agents coming for him are. He can calculate it, or his computer can calculate the chances of success. He knows that the only way he's going to get out of this is by uploading his consciousness to this other corporation. Yeah, absolutely. Essence Humanity Rules make statements about the world. That's exactly right. Five Monkeys. Yeah, my mic is cutting out, according to Larry Nom, but not according to Weldingist. Okay, so I'll have to check this. It might be a network thing. I hope it's just you, Larry Nom. If it's not cutting out for other people, then I guess, yeah, well, cool. All right, good. Okay. It'll be up later on YouTube and on here as well for as long as it stays. So you can rewatch any bits that you thought, man, it sounded like he said something really brilliant there. I gotta listen to that again. Well, not if I was just waffling at the time, then that's all good. Right, so yeah, he has all of the intel but none of the power. So that's an interesting thing to play with. Like, what is the sort of limits? Like, you have this information, what are the limits of what you can actually do with it? How can you make choices within that space? That's one of the things that I really like about Powered by the Apocalypse, is giving players all the information and having either, in certain cases, them make the hard choice. Well, they should be making hard choices anyway, right? I'm a big fan of telling them everything and letting them choose what to do about it, right? And whether that's what to do about it or what bad option to take or how to get away from it, or in the case of the harm move, like, do I lose a limb, lose some cyberware, or take more damage? That kind of question that's the kind of question I both like to see encapsulated in moves and also like to see more broadly. Do I have another theme? Yeah, okay, so I should have put this a little bit higher, I guess, but this is sort of the final moment. What is consciousness? And I've already sort of talked about that, so I'll skip on. So, some of those things the Sprawl already does. Some of them it kind of glides over, leaves implicit. But if you were going to hack your game to do something like this, I think there's a couple of different angles. Like, this is only a very small film, and it's pretty solidly in, I'd say, the mainstream Cyberpunk, so most of it, I think, is already sort of covered by the stuff that Sprawl does. But there's this dichotomy between the unreal people without cyberware and the real, presumably, who have cyberware. I'm not sure exactly how you might go about tackling that, but you could definitely do it. And there's two sort of ways that you might approach it. One would be technological consequences, and one would be social consequences. And so the question you would want to ask yourself is it a problem not to have cyberware because of what other people think about me? Or is it a problem to not have cyberware because I can't do things that other people can do? So an analogy in the modern world might be the internet. It's a problem to not have internet because you don't have access to a lot of stuff. Like, you don't have as good access to information, you might not have access to certain rights or government services, depending on where you are and how much your particular country or area is digitized. Is it so much of a problem because of what people think of you if you don't have internet? Maybe, but I don't think that's the real cost in the current world. But how much does that apply to this future world? So, does cyberware put a technical limitation on you? Does its lack put a technical limitation on you? Or does it put a social limitation on you? So those are kind of the two main ways that I might actually start to approach a question like this. And yeah, there's totally an overlap between social pressure and actual capability. Good point, 5 monkeys. Yeah. And you can incorporate both of those in whatever rules you make or whatever moves you decide to add, or agenda or principles that you tweak. Likening cyberware more to fashion, yes, in the visuals, in a certain way, yeah. Although I do think it was more than that. Certainly the way that he talks about it, and the name, the Unreal, I don't know, that seems to evoke to me more of a actual difference than just a fashion. But that would be another way to take it as well. If the cyberware is just a fashion, then that might point more at a social limitation. And if you're not, like, obviously chromed or neoned in this case, then there is some sort of, like, discriminatory action taken against you that has game implications. Yeah, you could definitely go that direction as well. So that's one, and that's a tricky one that I think in terms of hacking is very broad and not really something that I feel like we can get into detail with. But one that I do think that we can get into detail with a little bit more is this question of backing up your consciousness. And this is something that you could easily just have as a fictional thing in the Sprawl, or you could, just as a fictional thing that you deal with as it is, if that's part of the world you want. And I've certainly played in Sprawl one-shots where this was a thing that we discussed at the start and was definitely an implicit part of the game that played its part in the fictional structure that we'd set up. But you can do more than that. You can give it a little bit more in the way of teeth. And do I have another one? Yeah. Okay. So there's two different ways that I might approach this. If I wanted to hack the Sprawl to give this kind of memory backup some more like fictional, mechanical, like grip on the game, then there's kind of two ways that I would look at approaching it. And they're sort of at the front end and the back end. And the front end one is a move that starts with something like when you back up your consciousness with RMII, and then what do you do? So you're going to roll some dice probably, you're going to make some choices probably, and then it's going to put you back into the fiction afterwards, right? But the important thing for this distinction that I'm making is that this is happening when you do it. So this is a move that in this case would be made when the protagonist pushes the button. He's decided that this is his only option. He pushes the button, he backs up with the corporation. He gives his, in a very kind of real way, gives his consciousness to the corporation. So that would be one approach. And then you'd sort of roll through the move at that point. Another way you could do it, and I feel like this might be my preferred way, is to sort of leave that as a mini cliffhanger and make the roll at the back end. So when RMI installs your consciousness in a new thing, all right, so this puts it at the end. So he's pushed the button. He said, okay, this is the choice I'm making. Boom, cut to black. Okay, as an MC, I now cut to someone else, and I go back to do what they're doing. Maybe it's X down the road who's rushing to get there. He doesn't know his buddy's out yet, although maybe he, because of this sort of ubiquitous information that these characters seem to have, he knows through comms or some sort of neural computer informs him, and then he has to get away because they're coming for him or something, right? And then you cut around the other players, whatever. And then when you cut back later on, when RMII are actually installing the consciousness, and then you make the roll. All right, and that would sort of... The advantage and disadvantage is if you do the first one, then everybody knows immediately what the consequences are, and especially the player can then prepare for them. Because the player is going to have to make some choices. So you'd give the space where the players are, where the other players are doing things for the player who backed up their consciousness to sort of make sense of the new situation and be prepared to play their character going forwards. I think the second one delays it and makes it more maybe dramatic, which I like, but at the consequence of we start a new scene, you've been installed in your body, boom, which might be what you want. You might want to really show that kind of future shock. I was dead, or I was in a building and I pushed this button. Next thing I know, I wake up and I'm on a slab and I'm looking at some bright lights. What's going on? Right, that sort of idea. And so those are two different ways you could approach starting to hack this move. The second part of the second one, and this applies to the first one, is what do you call the thing that you are now in? And this can say a lot about your campaign and your setting in your game. Is it a shell, like Ghost in the Shell style? Is it a body, which would imply that it is the same as any other body? Is it like a meat suit? Is meat suit a technical word or a derogatory term? In the Takashi Kovacs novels, it's called a sleeve, which certainly evokes a certain different thing. I feel like in Fraser Simon's Cascade setting book for the Veil that is he just kickstarted, he has another term for this kind of thing as well, like a shard or something. I'm not sure. But this might also say a lot. And the point here is that for the purposes of the move, it might not necessarily matter, but for the purposes of using the move to evoke flavor about the setting, I think this kind of word choice can be pretty important. So yeah, when you back up your consciousness, and you could maybe, like, what word you use for consciousness, when you back up your memories, when you upload your memories, like, it's worth thinking when you hack any Powered by the Apocalypse game and make new moves, to think really carefully about all the word choices you make, because the words that you write down for the move will evoke certain things in your players, or for your players, when they read them. Yeah, sleeve is very disposable, as Five Monkey says. Yeah. And so is shell, in a kind of way. And shell kind of implies a sort of, like, kind of armor against the world, maybe. In a way that meat suit definitely makes you think of something like zombie and puppet. Like, puppet is another one you could use. Could be that says something very clear about the way that you're envisaging the relationship between the body and the mind. So I think, let me switch over and we'll see. Switch over to this other screen that I prepared earlier. Okay, and maybe if people are interested, we could sort of take a look at the kinds of things that you might do with a move like this. So I've written at the top of this the basic kind of principles of move creation, that whenever I think about making moves, this is where I want to start. That you want to start in the fiction with a statement that says something about the fictional world. You want to move into the mechanics, the like roll plus whatever, and then whatever you have to do. And then you want to lead back into the fiction with whatever the kind of outro is. And this will enable the conversation, because you want the conversation that is the core of Powered by the Apocalypse games to flow. You want it to go, we are talking about things in the fiction, something happens that we need to resolve, we resolve it, and then the move itself leads us back in. Right? So a couple of things that I thought as potential things to think about, and this is related to what I was talking about before, between social and technological. A couple of things that could be potential interesting choices are that there are problems with the transfer, technological problems, or problems with memory, or that there are costs involved. And I feel like I saw a couple of suggestions in the chat as well. Looking back here, Welding S said, in Freebooters of the Frontier, you make the death move the moment somebody turns you over to see if you're still alive, and it works great. Yeah, that's the way I would do it as well. I'm not familiar with Freebooters of the Frontier. Let me write that down. I'm going to look that up, because that sounds like the kind of sci-fi spaceship fun that I might be into. That's in practice the way that I often play moves like acquire agricultural property and the death move in Dungeon World as well. I think it works. And no matter which way you write these, you can still do that. But writing them in a certain way will tend to privilege a certain way of doing it. So yeah, Five Monkeys suggests the corpse sells copies of your uploaded consciousness, which is a really that's really cool, and I think that would work for either of them. I'm just gonna I got so much stuff on my desk here, just throwing stuff around to get my keyboard more accessible. And that, so these problems with transferring costs are sort of general things. You wouldn't want to. I mean, you could put those as sort of outcomes. When RMII installs your consciousness in a new body, pick one. There are problems with the transfer, there are costs. Okay, and that would be the kind of really broad move, like the one, what do I call it? Like conduct an operation in the Sprawl, that is just designed to be very broad. It's sort of like an auxiliary move to help you think about the way you might do that kind of sort of quickly sum up an operation. It's kind of similar to the setup move from Blades in the Dark, and that's not a surprise or a coincidence, because they're both derived from the same move in the Regiment, which is an unpublished but excellent Powered by the Apocalypse game about squad level sort of combat and interaction, which I highly recommend you to look up. It's by Paul Riddle and John Harper. Yeah, and I hope that one day sees the light of day as a published book that I can hold. Until then, I can run it from the playbooks because it's great, but it maybe requires a little bit more. But these are broad things. But I would want them to for a move to be far more specific, and you probably want to allow some wiggle room, but you want to be more specific so that you can give like fictional leads back into the fiction. That's what the wording of these does. It takes you back. So something like the corpse sells copies of your uploaded consciousness is good. It's good because, and I like it because it tells you something specific that happens, but it leads it quite open in that it doesn't say who it sells them to. So you can choose that knowing that somebody has copies of your consciousness out there, and that's a problem, and that is a very real thing that you as a character can have a problem with, or you as a player can engage with. But it doesn't limit the MC what they do with that information. So the MC can just look at the list of corporations and say, okay, well, this corporation has a clock at 2300 with the team. They are likely to be open to buying a copy of an uploaded consciousness so that they can use it for intelligence purposes, right, and analytics. Or maybe it's some corporation that is specifically interested in memories or uses drone shells a lot and wants to experiment with putting human consciousness into drones or something like that, right? That is not necessarily involved with the characters yet, but has some fictional reason to do it, right? But there's lots of options. It gives you something solid that you can grab onto, but gives you options on the way out. So what other suggestions do we have here? Missing memories, difficulty adjusting to a new body. Yeah. And so I would want, so for missing memories, I might do something like one of your memories is missing or altered. All right. And this gives you, so phrasing it like that means there's something kind of solid. One of your memories is missing and altered. And this kind of immediately asks the question and should prompt the MC to ask the question, which one? Tell me about this memory that you lost, right? That you now don't remember. Which immediately sort of puts us back into the conversation and also has the effect of allowing the player to sort of think more about their character and develop more of their character out into the open, maybe get some headcanon that they had into the table and sort of into reality, as it were. I'm having a conversation with some other friends at the moment about player secrets and whether that is good or bad at a table in different contexts. My principle on secrets is that they need to come out. That's the main thing. If your character has a secret that you don't want to tell anybody yet, okay, fine, we can work with that. I usually play with open player knowledge and restricted character knowledge, but if that doesn't work for you, that's fine. But the key is that if you have a secret, it's only cool if everybody knows about it, so there has to be a way for it to come out at some point, right? And so this might be a way for you to expose something like that. That could be an interesting way, actually, if your character was secretly employed by a corporation, and then the memory that they lost was the memory that they had been secretly employed by the corporation, and now all the players know that you used to be secretly employed by the corporation, but now none of your characters do, including you. That would be pretty cool, actually. And I feel like this process of thinking through the kinds of ways that the move results might feed into play, like I just came up with that sort of off the top of my head, that example, that's a good sign, right? If it inspires you to think about think about things immediately, then it's probably going to inspire other people to think about things immediately. Difficulty adjusting to a new body. Yeah, that's a good one. And this is one that definitely applies to the second. Now, how would we word that? To be both, give a specific kind of hook, but also be kind of general. Because if we put down, you have difficulty adjusting to your new body, and you pick that, you see that result as a player, that doesn't immediately give you something to hang on to. And ideally, I want something that immediately you can grab onto. Larry Nom says that Adam Cobold had a good discussion about secrets at Secrets of the Table in Office Hours. His one of his streams. Yeah, I bet. I don't always agree with Adam on everything, but he's always it's always worth listening to his thoughts on GMing in his streams. Always good value. Yeah, so how would we do that? Let me difficulty adjusting to new body. So why don't we think about this? What we've got here, these two could equally apply here. Right? When you back up your consciousness with RMII, let's say will cell maybe, because this sounds like something that's going to happen in the future, whereas this, or not, whatever. I don't know. We'll just leave it. One of your memories. This one is definitely linked to this, although not linked to this, right? Because it's when you actually get installed in the new body that you discover that this is a problem, right? That you can no longer remember this. You maybe don't discover this yet. But this move about backing up your consciousness doesn't say anything about having a new body. So this one isn't appropriate for up there. And you could, again, this is another thing, you could do both of these as different moves if you wanted to have a different set of consequences. I would probably err on the side of just doing one. But again, it depends on how much sort of mechanical weight you want to put on this. If you really want them to think about this, and maybe your backup, your consciousness is, I don't know, you might say roll plus cred spent or something like that. That could be one way of doing it. And yeah, for these, because these are bad, I would just do on a 7 to 9, choose one. Probably. Maybe. I mean, this, and then again, this, what you choose, the numbers you choose here say something about how deadly this is, obviously. Because if you said choose 2 and you had 3 options, then one of these is not going to apply. So anytime you back up your memories, it's pretty bad. If you're choosing 1 on a 7 to 9, maybe it's not quite so bad. Oh, getting owned. Yes. Right. Yeah. No, and so that. Thank you, Weldingist. Yeah. Getting owned, and that was it was one of the ones that I was thinking about, but I didn't write it down for myself, and maybe it costs, right? So the important question is like, where would you put this? So, as Larry Nom says, how much do you want the PCs to suffer? So let's make an executive choice here. Should we go with shell, body, meat suit, or something else? Anyone have thoughts on that? Waiting for the delay. I I'm just going to go with body for now, but if somebody suggests something, we'll totally switch it. Okay. Conscious in your body. Roll plus what? Okay, let's go sleeve. And you could, like, the other thing is that if there are different things that you can get installed in, and you want to really stress some sort of distinction between them, you could have different moves. You could even have something up here. So if you have a move when RMI installs your consciousness in a new sleeve, with the implication of kind of disposability and repetition, you're rolling blah blah blah, and if in a new body with maybe the more implication of permanence, then that might be another thing with a different set of negatives here, a different set of complications. Then maybe you might have both moves, and one of the ones up here determines which one you get. So choose one. It might be you're uploaded into a sleeve rather than a body, or a body rather than a sleeve, or you're sort of uploaded as firmware or something like that. Let me write that down. I don't know, maybe this doesn't. Yeah, I don't know whether it would go in here. Let me write it down. You will be uploaded as, let me say hardware. No, because what I'm thinking of is some sort of permanence, that maybe you've done this, but you're kind of permanently attached to something. Maybe I should just say that you will be permanently. You will be burned into your new sleeve. And this would be something that would probably need some additional explanation. What I'm thinking of here is that, like, you're in the sleeve, and to get out of it, it's a real problem. So you couldn't necessarily do this trick again. So maybe this is the cheap option, right? That executive customers with RMII can just get multiple reissues. Oh, the sleeve's worn out, let me go into a new one. But if you are choosing the kind of cheap and substandard version, then no, that's it. And something about the copying process meant that you are now permanently wedded to this new hardware. Right, so roll blah blah blah. When RMIA installs your consciousness in a new sleeve, roll blah 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 blah. Okay, so there's two different directions here, and I'm thinking about Welding Est's note about owned, right? Because that should definitely be in here, because owned is a pretty fundamental stat in the sprawl state tag, and it totally makes sense to incorporate it more. So there are two ways that I could see doing this. One of them, and this is the harsh way, getting back to Larry Nolm's question about how much you want the PCs to suffer, or I don't think of it as suffering in this case, but I think of it as becoming more entangled. And this may be not the most elegant wording, but in fact, I would not word it like this. I would say, this. When RMII installs your consciousness in a new sleeve, you are owned. Roll blah blah blah. Blah blah blah. Right. Okay, so this would be the harsh way, in my mind, right? This happens, you're owned, straight up. They own you. All right, and now let's deal with the sort of movable consequences I get. And again, it might be this kind of move. But what would we choose to roll? Cred might not always be appropriate. Cred might not even be the most appropriate here. Because here, when we back up your consciousness, I guess there's two kind of things. One, and again, this comes back to these sort of two principles down here. What are the costs of this, and what potential problems are there, and how might one of your stats overcome these problems? Like, is this a matter of having the kind of some sort of physical coherence or mental state that means you're able to deal with this change more easily, or is this a straight up cost? Right? Does this have anything to do with you, right? In any way that the stats model, and so you might say that when you back up your consciousness with RMII, you roll backing up your consciousness. Like we could go mind, could go meat. It could be about how calm you can stay during the process. Any of these are possible. It's really a matter of what you want the game to say about this process. Like, this is in some ways a sort of philosophical question about what you want your move to say. And the same with this one. When you install your consciousness, what is it that governs sort of the complications? And we might think of that in a kind of simulationist way. What do we think? How do we think that would actually work? Or we might think of what makes more narrative sense. And I don't know which one you're talking about there, Five Monkeys. Cool for backup. I kind of dig that. Synth is good, actually. Yeah, synth is probably the most obvious, actually, in both cases. If you want to think about just how well you interact with technology. In fact, I would probably let's just say that. But let's keep in mind that any of these are good possibilities. I'm gonna leave actually those three. Because each of those, I think, says something clear and different about the process and what can go wrong with it. Is the success of your consciousness backup a matter of money? Is it like, I'm going to make it rain and it's going to be fine? Or is it a matter of how well you can interface with technology, which is probably the second best option? But yeah, as Five Monkey says, it's easy for synth to become the god stat. Or it isn't yet. I mean, it isn't at the moment. So it would really depend on what other moves you've made. At the moment, synth is really good if you have a lot of cyberware. But if you don't have a lot of cyberware, it's not very good at all. So it's like... so it depends a little bit on how you want the game to work. How you want your particular setting. That's the way I'd think about it. And then cool maybe is something about like... It's a process that takes a little while and you have to maintain your composure to do it. And I like what that says about it. I think I would go with one of the first two. I'm just going to highlight those. I think all of those are good options that are worth thinking about. No, I don't want that. I want you. And I want you. Okay. And maybe this one belongs in the next one. I don't know. New sleeve has limited functionality. That's good. I think I like that, yeah. And these can be different, I guess. You can have 4. New sleeve has... And again, this gives you something, will give you something to tangibly grab hold of, but gives a lot of flexibility. And then to go with Five Monkey's other suggestion, your new sleeve is obviously artificial. And so this one is artificial. Is interesting because it says something about the game as well. It says something about the setting. Because this is a list of negative things. And this says that your sleeve is there, looking artificial is negative. So if that's something you want to play with, then this would be worth including. If this is not something you want to play with, then it isn't. And I think in terms of new skin, this one would not be appropriate. Because I feel like in new skin, one of the things that he's talking about is that he wants cyberware because everyone has cyberware and he needs cyberware to participate fully in society in whatever way. And it certainly doesn't seem like anybody has a problem with something looking artificial. In fact, you might even say the opposite. Your new sleeve looks unreal with a capital U. Ad7 says maybe instead of artificial you can use disgusting. And what that is depends on the setting. And that's good. And disgusting is a good word because it's very visceral and emotive, and then immediately starts a conversation really about what is disgusting in this world. So I'm gonna sort of slash those two. So when you roll, do we want to? So if you're doing with both of them, I would think seriously about having different rolls for each. So it wasn't just like, oh, I roll with my +2 and then I roll with my +2 again. So it would switch it around. If you were going to go with cred spent there, I would probably go with synth here. If you were going to go with synth here, I mean, maybe I'd go with cred spent down here. And in some ways that makes more sense because here you're doing the backup. This is when you actually have to decide what you're getting. Five Monkey said there would be a greater tolerance for the uncanny in the sprawl. And I think that's probably right. Like when you think about Cyberpunk world, you usually think about some pretty extreme body modification, whether it comes down to like real internal stuff like cyberware or just like stylistic body modification is a serious cyberpunk theme that has been running through and continues today. So maybe this is not at all appropriate for your particular game. Okay, I feel like there was something else in the chat that I missed. Oh, I see. Yeah. And ad7 maybe synth, but you can also spend cred to ensure good results. Yeah, and so you could have just when you buy a new I mean, you might want to do, I was about to switch "you are installed correctly" to "it is installed correctly," but I think "you" is better. You are installed correctly in your new body. Everything's cool. And that would make a very strong statement. Right. That if you can afford it, then it's fine. Right. And this says that this is not a technological problem. This says that this is entirely a question of economics and social status. It says that if you have the money to get this done right, it's done. That's cool. We've got the problem is there's no problem with installation. The practice is perfected. And then yeah, as Five Monkey says, what does a body cost? Right, and that's why I've put this as an X. Is this 20 cred? Is this 10 cred? Is this 5 cred? Maybe there is a whole extra catalog down here. Spend X cred. And so yeah, you might imagine that like what kind of shitty sleeve are you going to get for 2 cred? Like this is the cost of what? A firearm? No, a good firearm? Like it's, yeah, I mean and this would say a lot about your world. But that it also still says that the technology is fine. Like we can do this as a society. This is technologically no problem. The problem is the economics and the social aspects. So looking back through the chat again, Welding S says, should we consider the idea that your new sleeve has, say, a different meat stat? You could do that. I probably wouldn't bother change because like extra complication and meat isn't necessarily your physical. In the same way that having a high synth stat doesn't say how much cyberware you have, having a high meat stat doesn't necessarily say like how big and strong you are. It's more about how well you can use your body. So a gymnast, an Olympic gymnast, would definitely have like maximum meat. And a bodybuilder might not. Like if you made you might make your bodybuilder like really strong and competent, but you could also choose to have a bodybuilder who is just like, I'm a giant meat triangle and I can't really move very well, and I'm like a boss fight for Jean-Claude Van Damme. If I hit him, he's going down, but and like they could both work with high meat. So I wouldn't bother messing with the meat stat stuff for that, or stats generally. But you could easily, depending on what you thought the process involved. If you thought the process was serious, if you were making a statement in the world that this process seriously changes you, and this is one of the questions I guess that the movie asks, so maybe this is worth adding. You might say something like, although that's probably not on par with these. Yeah, and I wouldn't necessarily. I mean, yeah, if this. I guess if the statement you want to make is that. Well, I guess this works. It makes it maybe extra complicated for not much benefit, but it makes a statement about the world. You could say something like that. When RMII installs your consciousness in a new sleeve, swap 2 of your stats and you are owned. So the sort of implicit thing here is that everyone has 2+1s and 2+2s. 2+0s, sorry. So you can always be exactly the same stat-wise, but the fact that you have to swap 2 of your stats says that there is a significant change. I don't know whether that's worth including or not. That would be something that would really depend on the specifics of the table and the play environment, fictional environment that you wanted to have. But it's another way. It's another thing that you could write in here to make a statement about the world within the move. So if I identify these two themes, that there can be problems with the transfer and there be costs, have I incorporated each of those into these? Not that I necessarily have to. This is a cost. This is a cost and a problem. This is a problem and also kind of a cost, actually. But not a social cost. Maybe it is. Yeah, I mean, I would be moderately happy with those. Again, if I'm using all three, and if this one is cred, I would not make this cred. I might, in fact, make this cool, this cred, this synth. Or I could double down on synth. Into a... Is that the way to model that? Having both of these into a new sleeve? Yeah. I mean, for the sake of coming up with some solid moves that say something about the world. Do I want to define these now? No, I don't think I will. Yeah, so I think that's an example of how I would watch a film like this and think, how would I replicate some of the core sort of thematic elements of this in a set of moves to bring some of the specific flavor of a specific cyberpunk media to my particular game. So I'll put these up on Google Plus probably, and I'll put links to them in the notes for the video. And you know, I'm sure people will be like, "Oh, that's silly," but then they can watch the video and find out why we've chosen those particular things that we've chosen. So what else? What have I missed in the chat here? Might have a custom move for better capability. Yeah, I could definitely see something like that, especially with one of these ones. You might. This is like, you get something. What's something between like top of the line and I'm just gonna put a perfect body, and that is totally open to what that means. And I might say something like choose 2 tags. Create 2 tags. And you get something about maybe that's create a custom move. Yeah, I totally agree, Ad 7. I mean, I actually think that 20 cred is not something that anyone would ever spend. Right? This is 20 cred is also the number that lets you win by escaping. Right? If you have 20 cred, you can buy your way out. You can retire to safety. So, which is as close as the sprawl gets to a sort of win condition. But that would be a pretty interesting choice. Do I want to spend this money on being safe in my current shitty sleeve, or do I want to get a perfect body and try and make enough money to get out again so that I can be out and have a perfect body? I actually like that as an interesting choice. And yeah, something like create a custom move, and maybe on this one you get a something excellent. I'm gonna say well crafted, because it brings all of these substandard, functional, well crafted, perfect. It's all the language of things, increasingly I guess artisanal things. So there's a sense that this is substandard or a factory second. Maybe pre-owned. And substandard. Yeah, something functional and utilitarian. It's just a synonym. Functional and I gotta go with that. Functional and mediocre. Yeah, it's perfectly fine. It's adequate. Well crafted. Well crafted. Yeah. And then something like create a new tag. All right, so spending 10 will get you something good. So you could create, if you were an infiltrator, you might create the tag stealthy or something like that and add it to yourself. And having the tag stealthy on yourself, which is something that you can't get in any other way, might be pretty good. And Welding S says, I'd just spend 2 to have a pre-owned body. That's a big flag for Give Me a Fun Story. Yeah, totally. No, I would do the same, actually. I mean, maybe if I had this much cred and I really wanted to play with this kind of choice, I mean, if you're rolling in cred, you might go for that, but I would certainly be fine. In the same way that when I'm playing a Powered by the Apocalypse game, I don't care what number comes up when I roll the dice, usually, unless it's oh, now I'm dead. 6 minus is the opportunity for fun. It's the opportunity for the MC to add something weird that you're going to have to deal with. And after all, the point of these games is dealing with the problems that the MC puts in front of you. So, I'm usually fine with that. 2 cred is negative tag. Yeah. I'm going to say choose or create a negative tag. And the reason I'm saying choose is because there's already some negative tags, including substandard, actually. So maybe I should not put substandard there. Pre-owned and... failing? Well used? While I think about that, one other question I see there, Five Monkeys says, in play, how much cred have you found the players collect? Yeah, and this is an interesting question, and it's certainly one that is somewhat topical because of the way that kind of the first half of the Roll20 Sprawl game went, where that team just found themselves in a total grinder, and cred included. So most of the time inadequate. Thank you, Weldingist. That is good. Inadequate. Low grade is good too, yeah. I like inadequate because it's like, this really won't do. Yeah, so I generally find that most missions are successful, and most of the time the characters get paid. That's the experience of when I run it. Sometimes it really comes down to the wire. I would say missions fail when I'm running them, and I have never actually kept track of this. Like, $25% of the time, maybe as high as 40%, but that seems too high to me. So I've been to 2 cons recently, and I ran the Sprawl 3 times, and at those cons, I think one of them we didn't actually. Oh no, right! I did it 4 times. So 2 of them they got paid, definitely. One of them they didn't. No, one of them they messed up the roll and it became a whole shootout. And the other one we didn't. We were out of time, so we didn't go to the roll, but they would have probably made it because they had not activated the legwork clock very high at all. Right? So they should have got a good result statistically. I have found so sometimes it doesn't go like this, but I've found most of the games I've played recently, people have only hit the legwork clock a couple of times, and yeah, it often comes down to tough choices at the end. Like, do we want to get paid? And it's important to remember that in the get paid move, the option that you choose is get paid in full. So I definitely, depending on the fictional circumstances, sometimes have them get partially paid if they don't choose that. Right? They get stiffed on it. Right? Yeah, sure. Here's the money. This isn't. Where's the rest of it? Well, screw you. That is a legitimate MC option that is totally within the spirit of the rules. Or you get paid in some sort of funny money corporate script that they can't really use except for certain corporate things. That is also like totally that counts as not being paid in full. So I have never had a player be able to buy out yet. But I don't know if I'm not. Yeah. One of the things in the mission files, which is the book that I'm currently working on, is one of the things I did in one of the missions there was introduce a new way of offering monetary rewards. Like sometimes if the cred situation gets a bit desperate, you might want other ways to think about how money might work in your games, and there is ample space for custom moves in that area. So yeah, that's that. Five Monkeys also says, okay, my experience, we tend to get paid. It's pretty grueling though. Yeah, it can be. Yep, it's totally. The whole process can be used for potential travel or infiltration. Not ideal, but interesting. Yep. Yeah, and definitely this move as it stands is not really a move that shadow operatives in the Sprawl would probably use lightly for traveling. So definitely not in the style of Eclipse Phase or the Takashi Kovacs novels. This is definitely, for people at the PC's level, this is an extreme situation move. Because of the cost. But if you took this, well, I mean, I guess you could just take your chances. And there might be, yeah, I mean, maybe not. I don't know. It would be interesting to see. That would be interesting. I could see some groups being looking at this, especially because you wouldn't necessarily have all three of these. You might just have one or two. And this is another factor where how exactly you set these up. If you chose just this last one, and you were already owned by RMII, maybe you just like double down. It's like, okay, fine, I'm a loyal corporate employee and I'm doing a job for them, so I'll do it. But again, if you wanted to have the players be jumping around from sleeve to sleeve, then you would have to think about like what were the costs involved and is it worth it? Would the players like this or would they not? Right? Because ultimately you want this to be evocative of the setting, but also like fun to play in or fun to play with. It's no point making a bunch of moves and then putting them down to the front of the players to have the players like eyes go wide and like horror and like push the paper away as fast as they can. Like, I'm never doing that. I'm just gonna die. Like, okay, well maybe your move is too harsh in that case. Yeah, Welding S says, I love players getting paid with corporate script because it's just asking players to get even more entangled with corps. Yeah, that's spot on, and that's definitely a big hook to get them more entangled with the Sprawl for sure. Five Monkey says the move is signaling then, and you're talking about get paid there, I think. I'm not sure entirely what you mean by signaling. In that, I think the obvious answer is yes, all moves signal things about the fiction and signal how MCs might use them. They should both open up options for the players, but also provide inspiration for the MC to riff off to continue the conversation. Does that answer that question? The move signals from the player to the GM what they want fictionally. Got it. Yep. Yeah. No, I think so. And they should. Like, these moves should both fit into a conversation in that they should come about through conversation in the fiction, move into mechanics, and then move back into the fiction. But also they should be part of a sort of meta conversation, I guess, between the player and the MC about what the game is doing and what they like about the game. In the same way that, when I choose to play a driver, I'm saying I want there to be cars in this game, or vehicles, or mobility. I want to be able to zip around. I want a cool chase scene. And the MC has to take all of that into account. If for some reason everybody makes a driver, then that says a lot about the kind of game they want to play, right? Okay, so Welding says, I'm interested in the difference between pick some good options versus pick which bad things don't happen. Which style of move results do you tend to use when? Yeah. And so this is, let me just say that this will be the last question, and I'm going to have to head off pretty soon. But this conversation can certainly continue, and if anyone has other questions, I'll put them in my document to deal with in future streams. Yeah, I tend to like the pick which it really depends, and I don't know if I have a rule. I really like the pick which bad things happen to you or which bad things don't happen to you. I think that's an interesting way of getting the players buy-in, I guess, to the MC fuckery. And yeah, but it really depends. I think it really depends on what kind of move it is and how often you think it being used, and whether you want generally a negative or a positive outcome from the move. And I think you can probably read a lot into the way I think about different moves and the way they relate to the fiction of the sprawl based on which one I choose. So pick some good options. Moves that I'm thinking of off the top of my head where you get to pick good options. Moves like assess and research. 7 to 9s are not actually bad at all. They're just less good. And that says that this is a game where information should flow and there shouldn't be big costs with information. But moves where I say pick which bad things don't happen, I would put, I think, is Mix It Up there, or is Mix It Up in more of a pick which bad things do happen? I feel like those are closely related. But Mix It Up says, okay, something bad's happening, you choose. All right, or you make some choice. I guess it's whether you're choosing the bad thing or whether you're limiting the options for the MC to choose the bad thing. And so the Sprawl is a game that says try and do this mission without violence, because once violence hits the table, and you don't roll 10 pluses, then you might be in trouble. All right, and similarly with harm, I think those are pretty harsh for the same reason. You might. I think get the job is more of a positive thing. So at the start of a mission, it's opening up options for you. At the end of a mission, it's what is coming to bite you. Is anything coming to bite you? Probably. Probably something is going to bite you in the butt. Although the fact that you can get, that's the potential biggest modifier. And I've actually, this is interesting, and I feel like this will be in an errata document when I eventually make one. There is a line in the advancement section that says no stat can be over +3. Or synth can't be over +3. That doesn't apply to move modifiers. Like, you can be rolling more than +3. If you get the job, if you get paid, and you have not filled out the legwork block, you're rolling at +6. Right? And that, I wonder if might have something to do with the money crunch that some people find. So I don't think I have a clear preference, Weldingest. I will think about that more, and I might decide that I do, but I think that's the kind of things that I'm thinking about when I'm deciding which one I'm going to use. And usually it just kind of comes naturally. Like, I didn't consciously make a decision when I was writing these moves and taking examples about whether these were going to be choose a good thing or choose a bad thing. They just seemed like things where I wanted to introduce more complications, so I made them choose bad things. So 5 Monkeys says player choosing the bad options has the right kind of empowerment, player buy into complications. I totally agree, yeah. I want the players to really feel like they're part of their own downfall. I think it's interesting, and some people don't like that, and that's fine. And you can possibly rewrite the moves to avoid that, I guess, if you really want to, or probably you're just playing some other different kind of game. I think generally the kind of people who play Powered by the Apocalypse, or the kind of people who like Powered by the Apocalypse games, like that kind of thing. I certainly do. 10 pluses, talk shit, and roll crits. Yeah, I mean, that's how you just be good at missions, right? Just keep rolling 10 pluses. It's like D&D. D&D is easy if you just roll 20s. Yeah, get a character roll with +5. Yeah, cool. Okay, so I'm gonna call that for a day. I'll put this up on YouTube later. I will put up the moves that we made in Google Plus post. Hi, Black White Life. Sorry, you're at the end of this. It'll be up on YouTube later. YouTube.com/Ardens I feel like I linked to that in the Twitch thing. Twitch. description. Yeah, you can follow me at Peregrine Kiwi on Twitter, or at the Sprawl_RPG on Twitter, or at Ardens_Ludere on Twitter. You subscribe on YouTube. You can follow on Twitch. The Google Plus community for the Sprawl is undoubtedly, is currently, I think, the best place for good in-depth conversation about the Sprawl. There is also a Reddit, which I pop in on occasionally. It's entirely fan-run, and I've definitely seen some interesting conversations there, so if you're on Reddit, that might be an interesting thing. I think it's r/the Sprawl RPG, one word. I'm not sure about that, but if you look it, you'll find it. I think that's all I have to say. So thank you all for watching. Thanks for participating. This went really well. I'm super happy with this. If you have any comments if you have discussions about the rule stuff, or if you have comments about the format, or questions or things you'd want to discuss in future episodes, I would love to hear them, and you can post them in any of those places. Twitter is usually the best place to get an immediate response. I would say Google Plus is the best place to have a conversation. Thanks for participating, everybody. Happy pie time, 5 monkeys. Get some sleep. Okay, and I will finish drinking my soy calf in my synth leather with my branded corporate shirt. And fumbling around with the buttons. See you.